Welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm thrilled you can join us today. We are going to be talking with a son about his journey and how he's documented that through 2 books. But before we go there, I always like to do a couple of shout outs. So first of all, I want to shout out to the Mark Arneson Band. I'm thrilled that they let us use their song Clarion Call as our opening music. You can download that on any of your favorite music platforms if you'd like. And then for those of you that are new, Alzheimer Speaks is about sound information, not just sound bites. We like to have real conversations with real people. And so maybe, just maybe, you can be our next guest. We interview people all around the world at all different levels that they're serving, from those who are living with the diagnosis to families, advocates, researchers, a variety of businesses, and people who just have thoughts on how we are dealing with this issue in the world. Another thing you should know of, if you are stewing on an idea to improve dementia care, check out Maud's Ventures. They are funding 3 different projects, $50,000 to $100,000 each, for seed money. So go to maudsventures.org and see if your idea fits their category. Now, I'm really proud. We finally launched Alzheimer Speaks' new website. Still has a few little ticks we got to work through, but it's much easier to maneuver. And I want to make sure that you visit our free educational resources page. There you can access everything about our radio show, our Dementia Chats videos, where our panelists are living with dementia. Dementia in the Arts educational program, again, highlighting those living with dementia. You can learn about memory cafes. You can learn about Dementia Map, which is a global resource directory that I am co-founder of with Dave Wiedrich, who has the Memory Cafe directories, dementia-friendly communities. There's poetry, and there's just so much more. Just go check out alzheimerspeaks.com and let us know what your thoughts are. Also, a really popular program that people have really liked is the Memory Camp. And that is going to be open again August 15th to the 18th. It's for people who are diagnosed along with their families to just have a beautiful vacation in Wisconsin. You can call 715-479-8255 for more information. And we are going to listen to the Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. They're going to talk a little bit about the footbar walker, and we will be right back with our guest.
I love the footbar walker, and let me tell you why. It is the option for my toolbox that I've been waiting for. Let's be honest, there are some clients who, despite our best rehab efforts, just aren't able to return to performing a sit-to-stand transfer on their own. Now I can offer my caregivers an easier, safer option that doesn't involve hoisting their loved one up from a sitting position. I don't recommend this walker for all of my clients, but I do recommend this walker for those caregivers looking for an easier, safer option with transfers. I would also encourage other therapists to add this walker to their toolbox. It's kind of like having my own mobile parallel bars for the client to pull up on. Whether it's a family caregiver at home helping a loved one with Parkinson's or dementia, CNAs in a long-term care facility assisting their patients, or therapists adapting to client and caregiver-specific needs, we now have a very safe and effective option to offer in the footbar walker. Check this product out at thefootbarwalker.com. That's it for today from Adaptive Equipment and Caregiving Corner. Have a great day, and don't forget, if you can't do it, adapt it.
Okay, so we are back, and I get to introduce you to our guest today, who is Dr. Norris Roberts, and he wrote the Still Here series books, which is about himself as a son in his 40s and his caregiving journey with Alzheimer's, diabetes, and heart disease. Norris describes himself as a Southern boy at heart who's living in the Midwest, and he enjoys beef liver and onions with rice and gravy and sweet tea and a large slice of pound cake and everything beautiful that his wife prepares for him while their dogs patiently wait for their food droppings on the floor because they're a little on the jealous side. Well, Norris, I'm thrilled to have you with us today. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, on our show, I always start out with the same question to everybody, and that is, how have you been personally touched by dementia in your own family and circle of friends? If you wouldn't mind sharing that with us, I think it's just helpful for our audience to know.
Well, first of all, my grandmother on my maternal side, she had Alzheimer's. My mother's eldest brother died from Alzheimer's. My mother's eldest sister had Alzheimer's. And also my mother had Alzheimer's and she died from Alzheimer's.
That's a lot of connection.
Yes. I've seen a lot of it in my life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, you have a book series, and why don't you talk a little bit about that? What I find with most authors, something happened that said, I have to write about this. I have to share this journey.
I think what happened with me, I was trying to learn. I was trying to figure out a way to cope, and so writing was a way for me to. It was like therapeutic for me, cathartic for me. It was a way for me to process what was happening. It was a way for me to analyze what was going on with my mother in particular, and so I mean that was the real start of writing. To decide to publish the book, that came as a nudge from other family and friends. Because I've been published before. I've been published academically, but never been published. I never published in this way before. So this was a first for me. So I was encouraged by family, friends, professors that I should write about this and publish it.
And I hear so many people talk about the healing process of writing, but this must have been a really different journey because it was so personal versus writing academically.
Yes, it was deeply personal because my mother, she was my heart. Mm-hmm. And so I mean that made it deeply personal. And I always say, I even said in my book, I feel like mothers are their children's first love. They made the connection even more deep. But my mother and I, we had a very close relationship. I'm very much a mama's boy. Mm-hmm. And anybody that knows me is that Norris, he's a mama's boy. My mother, we had like a really good relationship. We could just sit back and just talk for hours at a time, just me and her. I couldn't even imagine, even as a young adult, not a week not go by and I not talk and I don't have a conversation with my mother. And even through the years, when I became an adult and I was married and had children, we had Sunday dinners. And my mother always cooked, and my wife and my two kids was always over for Sunday dinners after church. And so there was always this very deep and very rich connection that I had, with my mom through the years. And for her to not to be able to call my name at some point, I mean, that was very disturbing, very, very disturbing. But, I had to figure out a way that our relationship and our connection will continue. Regardless of the memory lapses, of the dementia, the disease, all of that, and part of my writing is just kind of showing how we kept that connection. I often say to people that my mother, when she had got the Alzheimer's, her spiritual awareness heightened, much like a person that's blind. When they lose their sight, their other senses heighten. And so my mother, I felt like what was happening with her, her spiritual awareness heightened. An example of that was when I was a little boy, she always said I reminded her of her younger brother, Howard. My mother, she has like 10 siblings. And so she has one sibling that was younger. His name was Howard. And it got to a point in the disease where she couldn't call my name, but she always said me and Howard had similar spirits. And so she started to call me Howard. and so because I understood that and knew that, I welcomed it, because that, you know, she may not could remember my name, but she did remember my spirit. And that's why I said her spiritual awareness had heightened. And so that's how it worked with her. And that's how we kept our connection, you know, continue to go. And in some cases, it continued to grow. Because I had to recall, I call them flashbacks in my book, like memories that she shared with me when I was a little boy, I just growing up, that's in life. I will use those memories to reconnect with her about things she shared with me. And sometimes she would not know it was about her. But then, you know, you just keep telling the story. Then she like, oh, then she'll say, oh, I remember. And then she know it's about her. But just telling her story to her made her interested. She was like, that sounds familiar. That sounds interesting. And then as you keep hearing the story, then she said, oh, that's about me. And then she'll laugh and she'll smile and you see a connection come back. And so that's how we kept things going, her and I.
Well, that's nice. And, you know, I'm glad you brought up the thing about the name. Like, I have a brother, and my mom used to call him her brother, and he was just mad. He didn't want to accept it. He just wanted her to know who he was and call him by name. And he really couldn't get past that, no matter how many different ways I explained to it, or that he even looked like my uncle. You know, when my uncle was younger, and he just didn't want to accept the fact that this was a loving gesture. She loved her brother. This, you know, you're not some mean bully that she's pushing away. She loved him, and to have that essence be attached to you is a good thing. She feels safe. She's happy. She's comfortable, but he just could not get there. And I know a lot of people struggle with that name. It's just, you know, it's so ingrained in people. And I also really agree with the heightened spirituality. I saw that with my own mom, but I've seen it with so many others, and I've heard so many other families say that too. I found as the disease progressed with my mom, and I'm wondering if this happened with yours, but as it progressed, kind of the quieter she got, but in some ways, the more peaceful she got. I mean, the more grounded she got, and you could feel it when you'd visit. It was just a different era. Well, like we were talking, you know, offline about how crazy the world is right now, and everything's just spinning. And when I went to visit her, everything just slowed down, and you really were in this present moment. And I know when people used to first start talking about, you know, getting in the moment, everyone's like, oh, that's taboo and that's new age. And no, it's just really about finding that peacefulness within you. And it can take a lot of different spiritual levels. It's not connected to one type of spirituality or another. It's just really that peacefulness within, or that's how I look at it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you, Lori. There was as much as she progressed through the disease, she got to a place where she stopped talking. I mean, then she stopped talking at all. I think literally, like, I want to say months went by and I not heard her voice. Mm-hmm. And that was another loss I had to like embrace and accept. And I was, you know, I enjoyed, you know, hearing her voice. They gave me comfort. And so when I didn't hear her voice, you know, it was a void, you know, was in my life. And it came so unexpectedly. And so it was one day I was just I was combing her hair, and I was just talking to her like I'm talking to you. We just talking, and I'm just talking. She's not saying anything. And then I'm telling her about all my problems. I'm having like this therapy session with her. And my mother, she got up and she hugged me and she said, and whispered in my ear and said, it's going to be okay. And I think, a large tear just came out of my eye. I was like, she heard everything I said, because it was not so much that she said it, it was the way she said it, and it was the way she held me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
She heard it all. And so the reason I shared this and why it meant so much to me, because I was going through a period, because she wasn't talking, there was other family members saying things like, oh, she's not there anymore. Mm-hmm. She's just a shell. She don't know what's going on. And that was an indicator mm-hmm. to let me know that, yeah, she is. She's having lucid thoughts. She is having, she's all there. It's just that with that disease, they just can't always communicate what their thoughts and what's going on.
That's so neat, though, to feel that validation from her, and I think people don't understand, as this disease progresses, the work it takes on their part to be able to produce those words and to get up and hug. I went through that with my own mom. She hadn't said my name in like 3 years. And then we had kind of it was kind of a funny incident. I won't go through the whole story, but she woke up kind of out of a dead sleep and then just said, oh, Lori, I shouldn't wear a bikini, because I had said something goofy to her. And then she giggled, and then she just went back to sleep. I sat on her bedside and I just rubbed her belly, because she's just laying there kind of basking in the sun for like 2.5 hours. I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, because it wasn't until that moment that I hadn't really realized she hadn't said my name in like 3 years, and how much I missed that. I mean, it's really profound when they have those lucid moments like that. And it really makes you understand that, just like a person who might be in a coma, the nurses will always say they can take everything in. They just can't respond all the time. So don't expect that, but just know that your connections are still there. And you said one big tear, I would have been just bawling and probably just melts right in her arms, if she did that. Because, my mom got to the point too where she couldn't hug anymore. And I missed being able to have a hug, but she just, she didn't have that movement anymore. So there's so many things that happen through this disease that are significant losses. And I don't think we always even understand the loss that we're going through, because we don't. Anyways, I didn't identify that I missed a hug until I got a hug. I didn't, or that I missed my name being heard until I heard it again. There's a lot of those types of things I think that we don't talk about, but boy, you feel them.
When you say that, it was one time that my mother, she was still with us, but we were, my dad's eldest sister had got her new house. Mm-hmm. And my dad, he has 10 siblings.
They both come from big families.
Right, he has 10 siblings. And so all of his sisters were coming to St. Louis to have this housewarming with, at his eldest sister's house. And so that was the first time in years that they all were together in St. Louis together in the same house. And so my one Aunt Lynn, she had she's big into baking. Mm-hmm. And she baked this coconut cake. And my mother always made me a coconut cake for my birthday. I mean, up till she couldn't make a coconut cake anymore. But what was so special about this coconut cake is that it was the same recipe that my mother had. Because they all shared recipes. Because my grandmother, she was my paternal grandmother, she was a big coconut cake baker, because my favorite cake is coconut cake. My dad's favorite cake is coconut cake, and my grandfather's favorite cake is coconut cake. And so it's a big deal in our family. So I got this piece of coconut cake, and I was eating it, and I just started bawling. Mm-hmm. And I was crying because I was like, I haven't had this cake in years, because my mother was sick for years. And it was identical to what she would make, identical to it. And so I can relate to just, like years, like we have not had something for a long time, and you have it and you don't even realize you've missed it for that long. And then you realize I've not had this like in a very, very long time. And it's very, very, very good. And that's what, I can relate to that. But I just think that's just part of the caregiving experience that you go through when you are, caring for someone with this disease.
Yeah. And it in all different ways, all different multi-sensories can come into play with that miss. Like for you, it was taste. For me, the hug was, textile. It can be sounds, it can be all kinds of things. And you're right. You don't even realize how much you miss it and how precious it is till you have it again. And then for me, I think the things that really triggered me were really simple things, really little things. They weren't big, flashy things. They were, a word or a touch, or for you, a piece of cake, and it just triggers all those emotions back, from all those years of growing up and things. Let's talk a little bit about your book cover, because it won an award recently. So why don't you talk about that, and even why you picked the title for your series?
Okay, my book cover, if you look at it, it has it's right behind me, like the actual paintings behind me. And so so in the initial book cover I had for Mama Is Still Here, this book is called Daddy Is Still Here. I had my mother's, it was illustrated, my mother was in front of this 3-pane mirror, and she saw 3 different images in this mirror. And so, and the reason for that is because that she was going through this thing with mirrors. She thought that she'd go in the bathroom, look in the mirror, and she would say, that woman's in the bathroom again. And the issue was that she couldn't retain enough memory to retain how she looked in the present. And so the image that she was looking for was someone, it could have been somebody in her, as a little girl, someone in her 20s, or someone like in her 30s or 40s. We don't know. But she wasn't expecting to see this person that's like 65 to 70 years old in the mirror. Because, we progress in how we look as we get older. And so from that illustration, I decided to move those 3 people along with her out of the mirror, because what started happening going forward, she started to have these conversations with like these 3 different people. And so, and then these conversations she would actually be trying to, she asked me to get snacks for them. And so I had to go and get apples or potato chips, whatever, for these three other people she was talking to. And so my interpretation was that it was like me, myself, and I. It was these other people that she was talking to. This was different versions of herself. And so the other interpretation that was going on, it was that sometimes she would act as though she was a little girl. And there was moments when she would act like she was this little feisty thing in her 20s. And then she'd be that mother, the one that embraced me in her 30s and 40s. And so I saw her act out these different people. So I just said that, okay, it's time to take them out of the mirror, because they already out the mirror, and put them alongside of me and my dad. And And so that's how I decided. That's why I did what I did for the illustration for the book cover. The reason I named the book "Daddy Is Still Here" is because that my dad was my mom first began with this disease. My dad did an excellent job taking care of my mother. I mean, he took her to the beauty shop once a week. When she couldn't dress herself anymore, he would dress her. She lost a lot of weight because part of the disease, she just wouldn't eat. Mm-hmm. And what he would do, he would dress her the way she would dress herself. Mm-hmm. And so he didn't just buy her like some sweats and say, put that on her. He bought her really nice clothes just to sit in the house with, because he wanted her to look like how she would dress herself, And so, my dad's friends, they would always say that my dad's name is Norris as well, Norris Sr. And they said Norris raised the bar really high of how a husband should take care of a sick wife. Because we kept socializing her. We kept taking her out to dinner. We never stopped socializing my mother. If there was like any important function or event that we all would go to, she was right there with us. If she had these bizarre behaviors, we didn't care. We kept socializing her until she was no longer mobile. Mm-hmm. So because of the example my dad set, I decided to call it "Daddy Is Still Here," because right now my dad, he passed on 3 years after my mother had passed. And so even though he's gone, the example he left with us is still here. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, Daddy is still here.
Okay. Well, and that's so nice to hear that you as a family, tried to preserve her as much as possible and didn't outcast her. She was still included. I think socialization is why my mom lived for 30 years with this disease. And I had people tell me, there's no way she has that. And you can only live 5 to 7 years because that's what the doctors were saying. And I'm like, the doctors don't have a clue with any disease how long we have to live. That's the bottom line. It's a guesstimate. Right. But, back then they really knew nothing. That's been almost 40 years ago now, because my mom died in 2014. And, they just didn't have a clue. And they still, many of the doctors still aren't educated on dementia and what it takes and the importance of still loving them and engaging them and having them be part of life. My mom, we would do the same thing. She would come to all the parties. I have this big patio in the backyard. So we would have 100 people over and stuff. And she loved parties. She just loved parties. And then she ended up moving into the nursing home, and then we would bring her over, and then we couldn't transport her anymore because we couldn't get her in and out of the cart. So then we ended up getting a service, and they're like, well, when do you want us back? And I'm like, when we call you, because we don't know how long she's going to last, And then it got to the point where she just couldn't come out. So then we all had to go to her, which was fine, but she loved being around people. And that, not everybody's a social person too. So you have to take that into consideration. I gather your mom liked being in the hub, it sounds like, and around people. And so, that's going to make a big difference. If somebody wasn't social prior, they're probably not going to feel real comfortable in a crowd now. And did you find that you had to adjust like noise levels and things like that? We found that light and noise, all of those things had significant impacts on her and could trigger her as things progressed. Did you see that too?
Yeah, we saw that as well. So like my dad had his 70th birthday party, and so that's probably one of the last parties she went to. And so my dad's a twin. So okay. I pulled out a party from my dad and his twin sister at this hotel. And my dad and my mom all dialed up. So he bought her this beautiful outfit. Me and went to we went to the beauty shop that day and got her hair done. And so, but she was still mobile, but then that's when the sounds and things like that really started to bother her. And we knew these things. And so we didn't know how long she was going to be able to stay at this party. We were going to just try to make it work. Mm-hmm. It was my dad's special day. And it got to a point where that, because we had a jazz band was there. And so she tolerated for a while, mm-hmm. but it got to a point where she couldn't. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we had to make an exit, and I took her home. Mm-hmm. So it was noise made a difference. Light did. Not light so much, but it was a noise that made a difference. The one thing that really made it was water. Water was a big deal for her.
Oh.
And so and I guess light was a big, water was a big deal, and light, it was a big deal, because what would happen, you know how you look at the concrete sometimes, mm-hmm. and the concrete kind of glisten?
Yep.
So, and with that disease, it compromised how they see things. So she would sometimes think that the car in the driveway was water in the driveway, because it was
sitting on a lake. Yeah.
And so I'm like, we're trying to go somewhere in the car, and she's saying, I can't go out there. I'm gonna drown. I can't swim. Mm-hmm. And she said, it's all the water is out there, and it's not. It's just glistening because the sunlight. Mm-hmm. So what I would do, she only weighed 100 pounds. Mm-hmm. I just pick her up and put her in the car. Mm-hmm. And so, and she was happy with it. She's like, okay, you pick me up, I'll go. And so, but she's not going to go and walk to the car herself. But a lot of times I just picked her up and just took her where I wanted her to go. I didn't even, to the car or even in the house. When mm-hmm. Sometimes she just didn't want to do it. And so I just pick her up and take her. Mm-hmm. Then she said, oh, okay. Then she's more willing at that point. So, yeah. So all those things were factors. And the one thing I tell people all the time is, as a caregiver, you got two jobs. Your first job is to keep them safe. Mm-hmm. And your second job is to comfort them. And that's it. And if you do anything other than comfort them, then you're going to have problems. You will have problems. I remember one time, my mother, like every Sunday, I go to my parents' house and I go pick them up, bring them to my house for Sunday dinner. My wife took up the mantle of cooking Sunday dinner with mm-hmm. my parents. And so up to the day my mother died, we continue to have Sunday dinners every Sunday. Mm-hmm. And if my mother if she wasn't mobile enough to come, my dad didn't feel up to it, we would cook dinner in my house and we would bring it to my parents' house mm-hmm. and have dinner with them. But anyway, the thing I wanted to share was this one day, they were coming to my house. Mother, she was having a good day. I mean, she got in the car with no problem. She got out the car with no problem. And so she got to the front door of my house and she just stopped. And I said, Mama, what's wrong? Oh, I had the screen door open. I said, Mama, what's wrong? And she said to me, are you serious? And I said, I kept trying to understand what she was trying to communicate. And she kept looking at this welcome mat. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at the welcome mat, and I've been doing some other research. I heard about people sometimes think that like a black welcome mat is like a hole in the floor. Yep. And so I just picked it up and threw it over in the landscape bushes. And she looked at me and said, how you do that? And she walked in the house.
Yeah, that depth perception is something else. My mom used to tap her toe because, if you're on asphalt to concrete to grass, I mean, it all looks really different. And in some communities, they used to put black tile around the nurse's desk or the elevator because people would think that it's a hole and they'd stay away from those areas. And, most of us don't, you don't know this stuff till you have to know this stuff till it comes up to be questioned. But even my dad he had brain cancer. And back in the day, we had a single driveway. And so we'd have all these people over for the holiday. I'm like, Dad, you got to get that car up right next to the garage door. He's like, okay. And then I go back out, I look out, and I'm like, he's like 20 feet away from the garage door. And I'm like, okay, Dad, I need your keys. I got to pull it up. It's as close as I can get, but things change. And I know I'm 63 now. So I'm starting to see some of those differences myself on what my eyes are doing, because part of that is normal aging, but part of it's not. And so understanding, just to pick up that mat and whip it around, or, when you were talking too about your party for your dad, my family had a 50th birthday party for me. And it was a big surprise to do. And my mom was there. Well, my mom thought it was her party. So, she wanted to open up all the gifts. And my daughter had bought me this beautiful emerald ring, and Grandma put it on her finger. And my daughter was really young. And she's like, no, Grandma, it's not. Because she was afraid it was going to get stuck on her hand and I was never going to get the ring back and stuff. But she was dancing and having a good time. And, another time we went to a wedding, and she thought it was my wedding. And so she was thanking all the guests, and they had like 5 different communion stands, and she went to every single one of them. And my brother wanted to go up with her, and he wasn't really used to being around her a whole lot. And he didn't know what to do. And he was just kind of tracing her, from one to the other. And it's like, just let her go, not hurting anything. And the family whose wedding, it was a very close family friend. They said that was one of the best moments, that we knew Dorothy got so much joy out of our wedding, that she was so proud of our wedding, because she thought it was her family's, and letting those things just be instead of trying to correct them. And that's what I love about some of the things that you're talking about. You're going with the flow, and you're adjusting to get back to those key points of making them comfortable, because that's really the crux of care. They've identified like the 7 stages of Alzheimer's, and you say that there's 6 stages of caregiving. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. So in the caregiving piece of it, it's by Denise Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, she's a person that her organization is one that gave me the award for my book. And it's called the Caring Years Academy. But she has these 6 stages, and I got them right here. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the expectant caregiver, the freshman caregiver, and the entrenched caregiver, the transitioning caregiver. And it's the last stage is no longer a caregiver, or the stage I am in right now. And then I'm also in the stage as being what you call Godspeed.
Mm-hmm.
So Godspeed is where I'm at now. And that's where, you take what you've learned,
mm-hmm.
and you get to be an advocate for others, and able, like what we're doing right now. We
mm-hmm.
talking about this, and we, sharing with other people some knowledge of what they can do to help them with their similar journey.
Mm-hmm.
The journey won't be the exact same, but it's going to be similar. And so there's a lot to learn just from our experiences. But it's just, it's just like all of us, you don't know what, when you get into this, you don't really know what you're doing. You're just trying to figure it out.
And you can't, even if there was a book like 101, it doesn't progress the same for every person and every family. So, the best things we can do is all bring forth what we've gone through, so that people know there's so many similarities, but there's so many differences too. And I think sometimes people, like, well, my mom doesn't act like your mom, or, your dad, or, we're not doing that, or, they would never like that. Well, that's okay. That's them. You have to adapt to the person that you're caring for. And,
right.
And I think, like everybody else, everyone wants a silver bullet in a pill form, so that they don't have to deal with it, and just make it back the way it was, and they want the same thing with caring advice. And it just doesn't work that way. Nothing in life works that way, as far as I'm concerned. And we have to embrace the spontaneity. But I love when you talk about Godspeed, because I think it really is important to share the journey. I think there's so much comfort people get in a shared journey, and it allows them to feel like, well, maybe there's people that want to hear my story too. Maybe I could help others, because I think we get pounded so often, and especially in the earlier years with my mom, the messaging was all so negative. Mm-hmm. And so everyone thought, well, I know nothing. And we all feel that way, but yet we know something more than someone else who's just starting. Even if we're 2 days ahead of them, we have a little bit more knowledge than they do, because we've experienced a couple of things. And giving that value, it's huge. It's huge to the person just starting out. You cried too? You were lost? You didn't know what to do? Oh, I thought it was just me. I mean, taking away that aloneness and that isolation, that's massive. Now, along with your mom had some different ailments, but so did your father and your father-in-law. So it wasn't just your mom, it sounds like, that you were caring for. So can you talk a little, because in most families it is a mixed bag, but I would think there's probably some overlap on how you care even with different ailments. But please tell me if I'm wrong, and highlight what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, caring is caring. And so, like, what was happening is my mother had the Alzheimer's. My father, he was like chronic diabetic. And the issue he was having, he kept having these low sugar episodes.
Okay.
And so, low sugar episode means sugar drops so low that we got to bring it back up, because they either like pass out or they become like dementia like themselves. They just don't get disoriented. And so he was going through a lot of those spells. And fortunately, every time he had one, I was there. He had one that almost took him out because his sugar had dropped down to 21. And they had to actually do the defibrillator out and resuscitate him and bring him back,
Oh, wow.
It was really, really bad. And I share that in my book as well. My father-in-law, he came to live with us right after my mother got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So the reason he lived in Chicago with my mother-in-law, and she had died from cancer, myeloma cancer. So he couldn't sustain himself off of just his income. So he can't live with us. But shortly after he moved in, my wife and I and my 2 kids, he suffered. Well, he got all new doctors, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, he asked the doctor, I need to get my prescription filled for acid reflux. His doctor said, I don't think you have acid reflux. They did other tests, found out he had clogged arteries. He had 5 clogged arteries.
Oh, wow.
So he had to go do open heart surgery. They replaced those veins with veins from his legs, which is not the best veins you can use, but at least it's something. And he suffered from this situation where this fluid backed up on his belly for it did for 2.5 years. And the fluid that backed up on his belly was sometimes, it'd be 10 pounds of fluid, 9 pounds of fluid, 8 pounds, and we had to get it drained every week. And so I was at the hospital with him every week, getting his stomach drained. And so I was doing that, taking care of my parents, and all at the same time. It was a lot. It was a lot, because I was just bouncing from my house to my parents' house. And so what ended up happening, I didn't work for like 3 years. And it wasn't it just happened that way. But the reality of it all, when I think about all the things I had to do, it really wasn't possible for me to work.
Yep.
Because it was nobody to do it but me. My wife, she was working. And so thank God, because that's how we sustain ourselves for that period of time. But other than that, it was pretty rough. So like this book I'm sharing with you today, it's called Daddy Is Still Here. It's really the backstory to my first book.
Okay.
Mama is still here. So in the first book, I talk solely about my mother and her Alzheimer's,
Mm-hmm.
and her going through all the different stages of Alzheimer's. But when I share that story in that book, I don't talk about the caregiving I was providing for my father and my father-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this book, How Daddy is Still Here, I'm sharing that story, and also they're sharing the story of being a member of what we call the sandwich generation,
Mm-hmm.
because I got twins. They were, at the time when all this began, they were like they were like juniors in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and they were on their way to college. And so, I was, you take care of your kids. Okay, it's still kids, even though like teenagers, and I was dealing with them. And when they got to college, they weren't doing all the things they should have been doing. So I was dealing with all of their shenanigans and trying to be a caregiver to my, to my parents and my father-in-law. So it was just a lot going. I was pulled in so many different directions. Even going through all of that, my daughter goes away to college, ends up getting pregnant. Mm-hmm. And so now we're dealing with a grandchild.
Oh, geez. Yep.
And so it was just, it was a lot, it was just, it's a lot. It's a story, a chapter in my book where I describe just one day and what one day looked like. And when you look at what one day looked like, it was exhausting. Mm-hmm. My editor, he was reading it, and he said that this book is not really about caregiving. It's about surviving.
Yeah. Well, you feel like that. I mean, and it is exhausting. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And, depending on who all the players are, like with my folks, my dad with the brain cancer, my mom with Alzheimer's, I wanted to care for them. They appreciated the care, that I was giving them. But then I was caring for a lot of other people, friends, family, employees and things. And they didn't always, they wanted the help. You become the fixer in everybody's eyes. You become the safe person to go to fix everything. And a lot of those people didn't really care. They really weren't putting effort into it. They were like, I felt like I was like a drive-through. They would come and they would drop it off and then I'm supposed to fix it. And I did that for a long time. And then they would drive off and then they would kind of come back with another problem. And it was just like, oh my God, I can't do all of this, So for me, I had to put up a barrier after a while going, I am not putting more work into your life than you. I will support you any way I can, but I have to draw the line there because I'm running out of juice at this end. I just feel like I'm being drained here, with everything. And not that I needed the pat on the back of the thank you, but my parents had given me so much. I mean, it wasn't even a question for me to help them out. I mean, that wasn't even a thought. But for the others, it got to the point where I felt a little used and abused. And when I pulled back, it was funny how many people dropped out of my life because I wasn't their fixer anymore. And that made me feel really bad and really kind of lost. And then all these other great people filled that space in and lifted me up. And so that can be I think a struggle for a lot of people when you have so much going. And I think we make other people dizzy looking at us too, when they know, oh my gosh, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing this. And they kind of go, oh, how are you surviving? But yet they don't really know how to support you, many of them either. And I know I sure didn't know how to ask for help. I was just too busy doing stuff. Did you fall into that rut too?
Yeah, I got a chapter in my book. It's called "A Ball of Confusion." That's why I'm laughing because I write about that. And the thing is that I did ask for help, but it's nothing worse than getting help than asking. It's nothing worse than a person said they're going to help and do something to exhibit that they're helping, but they don't want to really help.
Yep.
So that was, like for me, like you, I mean, it wasn't even a thought. It wasn't a question. I mean, these are my parents. I love these people to death.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to. It was never an issue. Am I tired? Am I frustrated? You know, I just did what had to be done.
Yeah.
And that was and the thing is that I treated my father-in-law the exact same way. I mean, you know, just because that he was my biological father, I gave him the same care and respect I gave my parents. But the thing about it was that we were all like a unit, because my parents and my in-laws were friends. And so they were, I mean, my mother would invite them to come down from Chicago for a fish fry. They were there. They came to our family reunions. I mean, it was like, it was a seamless thing for us. So it wasn't no question about, I mean, yeah, of course I'm going to take care of my father-in-law. But the challenge I had was that, the other challenge I had was just, you know, when people not getting what they want out of the situation, like my parents couldn't be, they couldn't do what they did before because of their ailments.
Yep.
And so people just start dropping off. They start dropping off. Yep. And the thing is that I had to grieve those relationships. And so the way I described it in my book, I talk about how my mother gave me this. When growing up, I had this picture, and we had this picture of what the family looked like, the extended family. It was this perfect picture. And I carried that picture in my heart, you know, all my life, all my childhood, all my young adult life, until up to this point where my parents got ill. And so when they got ill, I realized that I got to look at these people now from my lens and not through the lens of my mother or my father anymore. And so I started to look through my lens, and I didn't like what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And it got to a place where I just had to just allow people just to fall off. I couldn't sustain the relationship like my parents did, nor did they want to, because that was my parents' thing, not my thing. I just came with the package. I wasn't their thing. Yep. My parents was their thing. I was just along for the ride. And I realized that we really didn't have a relationship. It was just something that I just thought we had. And so I had to grieve those relationships. And I went through that whole cycle of grief, like denial. I went through that. I went through, well, maybe if I had did this, like bargaining, maybe it wouldn't be this way. Then I got depressed. Then I got angry. Then I went back and forth in iterations of all of that. Now eventually I just accept this is the way it's going to be.
Yep.
And that's what I did.
Yeah, it's a interesting journey, that's for sure. Is there anything that you want our audience to know about the journey? You know, for them, for those who are, you know, walking this path right now, any words of wisdom?
I think the biggest thing is for me, I said two things earlier, and I say them again. You got two jobs: keeping them safe, and then comforting them.
Yeah.
The other component to this is I call it the 3 C's. And it's about coping, caring, and conquering your fears. And so I think what's really important for especially a newcomer to this journey of caregiving, and especially Alzheimer's, you really need to educate yourself on the disease and caregiving. And the reason I say that because without that, you can never conquer your fears. And the other thing too, you know, my book has Bible scriptures and it has prayers. And so I'm a Christian, and I had to really dive in deep into my faith to really navigate through this whole journey. And so my prayer life got big real quick. And so, if you know, in my book, I always end every chapter with a prayer. And so, I really, prayer was kind of my weapon. I don't want to say weapon, but it was a resource that I used just so I can just strengthen myself to keep going continuously, because it was really no one else to feel me other than my faith.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would encourage people to do. I use my faith to feel me, because you get depleted so quickly in this caregiving journey, regardless of what that disease may be, because that the people you're caring for are people that you love. And it's hard to see people that you love suffer. And so you need to find some way to replenish yourself. And that's how I replenish myself.
Yeah, and faith is a supercharger for a lot of people. And I do think, we're also used to, plugging in our phones, but we don't think about recharging ourselves. I know I sure didn't on the journey. I was too busy being busy, in the beginning. And then it was like, then I really realized, oh, I can't be my best if I'm not fully charged. I think the other thing about faith too is it allows you to not feel alone, because there's a lot of things that happen that you just question, like, why is this happening? But if you have that greater faith, whatever it might be, there's a plan. And for me, I think of with my mom, because to me, it turned into a very spiritual process that I wasn't expecting it to be, but she taught me so much, and I'm thankful that she lived as long as she did to teach me as much as she did through her illness, so that I could help others. And that, that gave it a purpose, just like with you. And I think if you can feel like it wasn't all for naught, there's something that I can do with this to help others. To me, that gave me a lot of comfort. Instead of, falling into the pit of why me? Why is this all falling on my lap? No one else is dealing with this. And you could kind of go down that whole other path, but it was like, no, this is my purpose. And this is what I'm supposed to do with what I'm learning, through this journey. And to look at, one of the things I learned through this, and I think I did it, but I didn't do it consciously, was I really learned to ask God, what is the lesson, when I'd get really frustrated. And sometimes I wouldn't ask very nice. Sometimes I'd go in the basement when no one was home, and I'd scream at the top of my lungs going, come on now, I am not getting this. I know there's a lesson. It needs to be clear to me, because this doesn't make sense to put any of us through this if there's not a lesson. And I just think there's a lot of lessons in a really strange package called dementia, and caring as a whole. And for me, when I learned to consciously ask that question nowadays, before I get that frustrated, but in earlier days, I did get that frustrated because I was too busy being busy, and I didn't even notice that I was kind of on edge. I think I'm much more in tune with my own moods and things. I think everybody else saw it, but probably me, because I was too busy trying to be in control and thinking everything was calm. And that was always really important to me. And now I know that, boy, there's a lot of beauty in detours in life. And sometimes you just have to let go and be spontaneous and enjoy what's there. Even if it's not like it used to be, that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful.
I would say one thing after you said one comment about what lesson is in this. Sometimes I feel like all the lessons aren't for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of those lessons is for others. I'm modeling a lesson for them.
Yep.
And so, and that's why I just think just having this whole journey of life, like even with my parents. I mean, I watched my mother care for my grandmother when she was sick with the Alzheimer's. I watched, my grandfather care for my grandmother when she was sick. Mm-hmm. I watched my dad care for my mother, and so those were those were lessons for me because that, again, like I always say, like daddy is still here. My dad, he modeled, he was the example of how a husband should take care of his wife,
Yep.
you know, and he could have easily just put her like in a nursing home and just went on with his life. And, you know, he could have easily did it, but he didn't. And he got joy out of taking care of my mother, even though it was difficult. You know, you just saw the light that came in his eyes. You saw the smile. You saw the joy, or you even saw the sadness, because this was his wife.
Yep.
And
so being proud of taking care of her. Yeah. That's what I saw in my dad too, was, you know, my dad was kind of like, well, this is my duty. I mean, my gosh, she's taking care of the whole family all our lives. This is not much to ask of me at this point. And granted, it's not easy. And I didn't know how hard her job was probably all those other years. But, you know, my dad did the same thing, just stepped up, and it was not questioned at all. Just not at all. And that is, I think that is one of the best ways for people to learn, is to see it modeled. So you seeing that in your dad, and even taking time to write, you know, the book on that one, in terms of his strength and his journey, and, you know, how that affected you as a son, and how, you know, both their stories are going to ripple out into the world. You know, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
It brings me joy that I was able to do that. And one thing I'm happy about, even with the first book, you know, The Mama Is Still Here, I published that book before my mother passed away. Well, I really appreciate that I was able to do it then, because it gave my dad a chance to get his flowers before he passed. Because when I did book signings, things like that, I would always bring my dad with me. And then I would always introduce him to like the audience. And every time he would always get a standing ovation.
Yep.
And it just made him, it gave him so much joy, because it's just that, you know, he thought what he was doing was just, you know, he was doing what he's supposed to do. You know, he died to death do his part, and that's what he was doing. But at the same time, to get the acknowledgement from others was just, it was priceless.
Yep. Well, and it just reinforces what he did was the right thing, and, you know, that he's able to help other people, and not only proud of himself and his relationship with his wife, but proud of you and what you've accomplished. I mean, there's a big ripple effect, you know, with all of that. So I do want to let our listeners know that they can go to your website and they can subscribe. And the website is stillhereseries.com. You can also go to LinkedIn and find him under Norris Roberts Jr. And we've listed the YouTube channel as well, and your Facebook page, Mama's Still Here, as well as your Instagram, you know, signature there too. I also want to just mention that Norris is on Dementia Map, which is our global resource directory. So you can find him there as well. But, you know, check these books out. What a beautiful, you know, story in each of these books, different types of journeys. But yet still connected with lots of great lessons that we all need to learn. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. Thank you for taking the time to write the books. I know that is time consuming, and most people don't understand how much time that takes to do, but it really makes a big difference to so many. So I appreciate you being with us today, Norris.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, I hope you like, click, and share. You know, don't keep these nuggets to yourself. You know, share these episodes. There are so many people out there dealing with different forms of dementia, and they don't know where to go. So help them out. Make it a little bit easier. You probably have a lot of people in your circle, just like the rest of us do, of people dealing with this that don't even talk about it. And so if you share a post, somebody might find it that hasn't opened up about it, and then we'll feel a little bit more comfortable about talking about it with others and get connected. So thanks again, everybody. We will talk to you next time. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebesti here, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.